All right, everybody, welcome back to How I Sell. Today, I have a special guest with us. He's currently the sales leader at Square. He's had numerous stops along the way in an illustrious career in enterprise sales. It's Mr. David McCollum. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Danny. And thank you for the kind words. Illustrious. That's a wonderful description. Appreciate that.
Well, we were admirers from afar and now up close on you and your background. So I'm pumped to have you. I know our folks are going to love it. Before we jump into the same 5 questions we're asking all of our guests on season 2 of How I Sell, would love to know, who is David McCollum?
I'm just a normal guy. I'm a dad of 2. I'm married to a wonderful woman named Megan. We got 2 little kids. I've got a daughter, Eleanor, who's 5, and a son who's 2.5. I was doing my daughter's soccer practice yesterday afternoon. I'm somebody who, just like anybody else, is trying to provide the best life for my family. That's what we're doing today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do appreciate, and I'm not sure if you checked out some of the previous episodes, but I really appreciate when folks start with non-work related things. It's, work can be so intense. It's such a big part of our lives, but we're really people outside of work as well. Yes,
that's right. And it is a very important part of our lives, probably more so now than I've ever seen it in my career, to be honest with you. Just there's so much, especially because so many people are home nowadays, there's such a blend and blurring of the lines. I'm sure you've talked about that with other guests, but man, it really is an important thing to kind of find and create that separation when possible. Because you're right, they're really the more than ever now that the career and the work stuff is more part of our lives every day.
Yep, absolutely true. Absolutely true. Well, let's jump into it. Again, want to mention for our audience, we are asking our guests the same 5 questions to give them the apples to apples comparison on all things sales and career trajectory. So if you're ready, David, let's jump in.
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. What is the best investment an early career salesperson can do for themselves and why?
As an early salesperson, the focus should be on learning and experience. And that's where I look back on my time, and my first job out of college was a sales job, and I had no prior sales experience. And I sat outside this guy, John Driscoll's office. My cube was literally outside of his office. And he probably was thinking to himself, what in the world is this kid doing? But every day I would walk into his office and I would just sit there at times, probably uncomfortably, for a comfortable amount of times, and just listen and learn like a sponge. And I would pick up on little things that he did, certain words that he would use. Funny, I look back on this, even the way he signed off on his email, I think that sounds like a really silly thing to copy or try to emulate, but I was just trying to learn everything I could at the time that I had. And I'm so grateful to have somebody like that who's willing to let me just sort of be around. It's really hard nowadays with COVID, providing that same experience for our new hires at Square, but we still value that sort of shared experience and collective experience and learning. And some can be captured, through tooling, things like tools like Gong or recording a Zoom meeting like this. But back then, I'm looking back at my early career, I gained so much just from being a sponge and listening and learning from others. John in particular was somebody I look back on. I'm like, man, I'm so grateful my cube just happened to be outside of his door. So
yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I happened to luck into sales. It wasn't something that I was focused on at school at all. And when I started, I remember I just had this like deer in the headlights aura. I did not know what the hell I was doing. And I was very fortunate to sit around, and we, at Groupon, we had open seating, to sit around a few folks that were just like really, really nice and let me almost copy their exact like actions in Salesforce, what to do with my notes, how to organize my day and structure my day. And that's so key and important. To just emulate folks that can do it or have done it before you enough to get that repetition built in.
Right. Well said. I'm happy you had that same experience, and we're fortunate enough to be around people who were willing to invest in you and give you that time.
Awesome. Question number 2. What is the biggest surprise you experienced early in your career and why?
I got to tell you, I still am, I suppose, caught off guard, but I was shocked to learn that I wasn't in complete control over my destiny, or really just in complete control over my career. I was sort of taught maybe, and at a young age, or maybe more appropriately, just kind of taught through some of the sales onboarding and mentoring and coaching that I had, that as long as I focused on my number and hit my number, that everything would be okay. And I learned very quickly and very early on in my career that there are things outside of our control. There are things that are company specific or company wide challenges. And this was a really big, surprising shock to me. I just thought all I had to do was worry about myself, kind of stay in my lane, hit my numbers, and everything would be a-okay. And the truth is that there's just a lot of things that can happen outside of our control. And I think that was a really powerful learning for me. It thankfully happened to me, at an early age or an early part of my career. And I look now at a lot of younger professionals and folks, even within our org, who are sort of caught out, when things don't work out the way they expect them to. And it's not personal at times. Like, it's not like the company's out to get people or anything like that. It's, sometimes there are just things that happen outside of our control, and that's okay. We need to be flexible. And we talk about resiliency all the time within our org, but just resilient in our response to some of the things that are outside of the control. So that was a big surprise for me, to answer your question. That was the biggest surprise for me early on, was just the lack of control I had. And that took a lot of getting used to.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Sales is often positioned as something where you put in this amount of work and you get out, this amount of output. I'm curious to know, off of that, what were some of the things that you experienced in that first career, as you're coming up, like, that were outside of your control? Like, what ended up being, surprising to you in that avenue? And
I mean, a great example. So I was fortunate enough to inherit a territory in my first AE job. So I started out as an SDR, and then I was promoted into an AE role, and I inherited a territory that was not very saturated. So I had a lot of greenfield, let's call it, just a lot of opportunity within that territory. Yep. And I started cranking, and things were going really, really good. And I was shocked at how good they were going. I was almost shocked. I was almost like, wow, this is incredible. I remember looking at this report, and I was the number 3 guy in the entire country. And it was my first AE job. I'm thinking, this can't get any better. And then our CEO decides he's leaving. And I'm just thinking like, okay, like, that shouldn't be a huge change or disruption to my deal, because I'm just an AE doing my own thing. I'm an independent, essentially I'm an independent player here at this point in time. But boy, did that have a material impact on our culture. It had a material impact on the way we showed up with customers. It had a material impact on some of the way we treated each other internally in the company. My relationship with the sales engineering team that I worked with and relied on very heavily changed, because he reorged. The new gentleman came in and reorged the way that and really shifted our entire go-to-market. So that's a great example of something that I didn't push the CEO. I had no involvement at all in the CEO's decision to transition out and go and try on a new venture, but it had a major impact on my ability to perform, or I would say it required me to adapt in a way that I was not prepared for, in a new selling motion, and have a new selling motion, new go-to-market, et cetera. That's an example that comes to mind, that I learned early on.
And that's again, something that's not coached or taught to you anywhere in life, really, up until that point. I went to business school, right? We do tons of case studies of, like, the successful companies, why they worked out, what culture had to do with it. But you're never taught, hey, tomorrow, your boss, your CEO, somebody else at the company with a lot of pull could leave because of whatever reason, and you got to figure it out. The company's not going to stop rolling. You just got to figure out, what you're going to do and how you're going to react to it. And what I've heard multiple times on this podcast for sure is, you can't control that type of action. You only can control how you react to it and how. Awesome. Well, moving on to question number 3. What is one mistake that you made early in your career that shaped the way you operate today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've told this story, and I've mentioned this to many people who have asked a similar question. But first of all, I will say I've made a lot of mistakes, a ton of mistakes, and that's okay. In fact, we talk often within our org about failure, and we want to be intentional about our understanding of failure, and we want to acknowledge that failure is absolutely, and I'll be very clear on this, absolutely okay. And we believe we can learn things from failure and react to that experience in a really positive way. I'll share some mistakes specifically and failures, and we could talk a little bit how that impacted my career and how I grew through some of those experiences. An example is early on in my career, my team was short of its number, really by not a significant amount, believe it or not. It was coming down to the wire. And I'd actually gone on site to visit a client or a prospect at the time in San Francisco. And I received verbal communication or verbal confirmation that I was going to win this deal from the stakeholder who I had met with in San Francisco. Yep. So here I am. I think I was 23 or 24, maybe 25 at the time. I can't remember the exact age. Let's say I'm 24 for fun. And I'm driving back down the 101, and I cannot wait to get back to the office, because here I am. I have this deal in my pocket, and I'm going to save the number, and I'm going to be this guy, and it's going to be really cool, and I'm going to get all these accolades. And I come back to the office on cloud 9, and this is where I made my mistake. I told everybody who would listen to me, including our CEO,
oh boy,
that this deal was coming in. And I did this and cut corners in my sales process, and did not obviously take the appropriate steps needed to limit my risk. And guess what happened? I think you probably know what happened here. I lost the deal at the 11th hour, right? And so, in that moment, I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. I let the team down. I felt like I let the team down. I remember lying on the floor as a 24-year-old, something ridiculous thinking about it now. I remember lying on the ground in my office and just wanting to hide, right? Because I just was dreading the conversation that was going to have to happen. And I learned a really valuable lesson, obviously, at the time, about communication. But I also learned a really valuable lesson about through this experience and about perspective. And it's something that actually my dad helped me get to. And he asked me, he could tell I was incredibly distraught. I had actually weirdly, coincidentally had a dinner planned with he and my mom that evening at a friend's house. And I was, not in a not really in a great mood. And he goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I just lost this deal and I feel like I let the team down." And he said to me this, he said, "Have you ever lost a deal before?" It's a rhetorical question, of course. He knew I had. And I said, "Yes, I have." And he goes, "Well, I can tell you what, it's not the first deal you've lost. I know that. And it certainly won't be the last. So keep things in perspective. It's a blip on a very, very long journey." And that, for me, really helped put in perspective at the time, just really what this deal represented in my life.
Yep.
And the truth is, in my life, and in part of this very long journey, like we're going to be on for the next next 80 years of my life, my goodness, it's just a blip, right? And so it was a really powerful moment. I don't think to this day he knows the impact that it had on me. I've never told him about that. But it did have a powerful impact on the way I showed up at the office, the way I treated opportunities in the future, the way I thought about my role and responsibilities. And so it had a very powerful impact. This loss, ironically, this mistake, if you will, had a very powerful impact on the way I showed up in the future. Yep. So that's an example. You want me to share another one? Yeah,
let's go for it. I'm just I'm admiring that advice that you got at the right time, and I think that's just such great perspective. And I want to hear the next one too. But I just think for audience, it's such great perspective to remember that, when you're in it, it feels like the end of the world. It feels like this is the one thing that's going to win or lose my career, and really, it's zoom out, right? This is just a tiny speck on an otherwise long career. So you'll have more opportunities. You'll lose more opportunities, but you'll have more. You'll win more. You'll lose more. But that's such great advice.
It's funny because sales leaders have a wonderful way of making every deal feel like the biggest thing that's ever happened to anybody, right? I mean, and sometimes that's really, really powerful and it can act as a motivating tool or mechanism, whatever you want to call it. But but it is funny every once in a while you get a different perspective from in my case, a father who's got a view of my life that transcends this specific deal or even transcends this career, right, that I'm in right now. And so, anyway, I just think that's interesting that sales leaders, I'm guilty of this too. I talk to my team, we ask questions about specific deals. I approach these deals like they really, 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 really matter, because in the moment, to your point, they really do matter, right? But the perspective, you back up a little bit, like you said, you just back up a little bit, look at the bigger, take the wider lens and look at things. It might help change the way you think about things a little bit.
Yep, that makes total sense.
The other mistake I made was I look back on this moment. I think it wasn't quite Jerry Maguire-esque, but it was getting there, getting close. So I decided, and this is goofy, I regretted writing this thing immediately, but I wrote in 2013 a blog. I took the opportunity to make a blog post and go on LinkedIn and share it about a change in sales motion or behavior that I saw potentially happening in the future. And to summarize this blog post, it essentially said, hey, this I win, you lose mentality associated with sales and selling today, which was at the time a very common way of negotiating and positioning enterprise software and enterprise licenses, is going to change, because in the next 2, 3, 4 years, this thing called software as a service is going to become more common, and the payback period is going to extend beyond a year, and you're not going to want to have your customers have this miserable, contentious buying experience with you, because you're going to need them to renew, or else you're going to lose money on these transactions. And that's kind of a synopsis of this blog post. You could probably go and find it. And this is 2013, I got roasted. I mean, these people coming out of the woodworks, people who I had been in SDR training with in Boston. I mean, how what are you, crazy? Perpetual licenses are the way of the future. Admittedly, that was the dominant way of licensing at the time. You would sell a gigantic upfront contract with they called it a perpetual license. And then there was an annual maintenance contract that was a subset or a very small percentage of that perpetual license in perpetuity. But software as a service, or SaaS, was not really a thing yet. It was becoming more of a thing. Now, obviously today it's, ubiquitous, and you very rarely see perpetual licensing anymore, because the lifetime value of these SaaS contracts is so much greater than these perpetual licenses that made sense for companies to go that direction. But at the time, my goodness, you would have thought I had betrayed this sales club, or I don't know what. It just got everybody fired up, and I learned a really powerful lesson. It really hurt. The feedback really hurt. People telling me I'm crazy, I'm soft, I've lost my touch, I'm out of touch with reality.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, why did I put myself out there? What a goofy move that was. And I learned a really valuable lesson about just being okay with not being the most popular guy at the time, or being even at the time in which I wrote this article, I had to be okay and comfortable with the fallout. Mm-hmm. And it taught me a really valuable lesson about confidence, about conviction, about putting yourself out there. And I look back on that experience and I think, man, in the moment, that was really rough. I mean, people who I had a lot of respect for and I really liked coming at me and telling me I was essentially, crazy. And it didn't make me feel very good in the moment. But looking back, it was actually a really powerful learning experience. And I'm happy I did it. I'm happy I put myself out there. So.
Nice. Well,
anyway.
Thank you for sharing and walking us through, kind of the emotional toll that it took on you too. I think it's not easy to make those decisions even in the moment. It sounds like you felt potentially, and maybe paraphrasing a bit, potentially like it was the wrong decision. And I'm glad you came to the realization over time that this is okay. It's okay to go out and on my own conviction and, what I'm confident in and share it. And I'm glad you got there. I'm glad you got there in the long run.
Yeah, and I'm also happy, thank God, that SaaS became more common. Honestly, it's nice looking back and being able to tell this story now.
Right.
In retrospect, it does make me, I feel better about it now. But I will tell you, for those for about a year after I wrote that blog post. I remember thinking to myself, what was I thinking? My gosh, this is silly. But now looking back, okay, it worked out okay. Anyway, but that's thank you for sharing. Thank you for saying those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, feels like a weird segue, but we do have to go on to the next question. Number 4, who has had the greatest impact on your career? And if you could expand, that'd be great. And sometimes folks take this question as they don't necessarily feel comfortable naming somebody, to a situation or situations that have had the biggest impact on their career.
Yeah, I've got 2 answers. I've got the easy answer, just because she's, she is such a meaningful part of my life, is that my wife, Megan, has had the greatest impact on my career, bar none. She's got incredible perspective and experience in her own career that's helped me. And she's really smart and has great instincts. And so, as somebody who I can confide in and talk through situations with, she's been incredibly valuable to me. And it's also really powerful, I'll say, knowing that in your life, you've got somebody who loves you, or cares about you, loves you, no matter what happens, right? No matter whether this deal goes through, or whether this promotion happens for you, or if you make a mistake, it's going to change the way that she feels about me. And that's a very freeing and powerful feeling that I think has really helped me in my career, is having that sort of support and having her alongside me. And then professionally, I'll segue over really quickly to more of a professional relationship. And there's a gentleman named Pankaj Prasad, who I worked with at DoubleDutch, who's a co-founder of DoubleDutch, and he had an incredibly interesting and powerful impact on me because of the way he led and responded with such intention in every interaction. And I had worked in a sales culture and environments in the past that were more, I'll say transactional in terms of how they viewed me, peers on their team. It was always about the number. Pankaj was the first leader who I worked with who looked not only at the number, because the number matters, but at the upstream impacts, if you want to call them that, but like the upstream inputs that inform the number. And he had this really unique perspective. And he was fun to work with because his approach was like, let's just go and break stuff and try new things. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I remember I started at DoubleDutch, and there was no enterprise sales team at the time, so no enterprise sales motion. We had an SDR team and a small business team that was closing small incremental deals, primarily with agencies and associations. And they hired me to figure out whether or not we could actually sell to some larger corporations. And we'd never done that before. And in 2 months, I didn't have a ton of success. And then I had a huge breakthrough, and I closed a very big deal with a company called TE Connectivity in Pennsylvania. And this was a big breakthrough because we had never done anything like this before. We didn't really have the support necessarily built at the time, but we were selling a little bit, kind of proving it, if you will, a little bit out in front of where the product was as well. And I remember he comes over to my desk with this big smile on his face, and he goes, I knew we could do it. And he goes, now, do you think we can do this again? Kind of a jest. And I just thought it was like the greatest, most genuine comment, just like the honest appreciation for the work that I had put in, but also like just the honest and sincere question. Like, okay, David, can we scale this? Like, can we do this again? Like, is this a one-off? Yep. It was so organic, real, genuine. And I knew his intention all along was good, in that he wanted this to work. He wanted me to be successful. He wanted me to try new things. He wanted me to challenge the way we did things at DoubleDutch. And that was a really, really cool environment to work in. It was very freeing to know that you can just, I go, let's figure it out. That sounds really fun. I can try figuring it out. That was a really, really neat experience. So I look back on he and my relationship, and I think, wow, that was really powerful. And he had a really powerful impact on the way I show up too.
Really cool. Really, really cool. And it's not always the case in sales that somebody says, let's figure it out, right? It's usually, especially early in your career, here are the things you must do to get to the number, the
Right.
result. So I'm glad to hear that you worked with somebody who pushed you in that realm. And I think it's always very cool when you get a boss or a leader that is in that mindset of, yeah, we got to hit the result. We need the numbers. Obviously, we don't have a business without the numbers, but we're on the journey to figure it out as well. So that's awesome experience.
I agree with you. And I think this, we think about this all the time in my current capacity at Square. Our team, my team, is operating at the boundary of where Square is today in terms of our ability and who we focus on in our support of our largest customers. I think there's a ton of value, especially in this stage in our journey, to just embrace and empower our team to be creative and to try new things, break stuff along the way, fail. We talked about failing fast, and I think that actually, if we allow our team to be creative and to flex that creative energy or leverage that creative energy in their interactions with our customers and with our colleagues and peers, I believe you're going to have a happier sales team. I think we're going to have a higher performing team. That's my experience. People could probably call in or write in, or I'm not sure how they connect with you, but they could disagree with me and be like, guys, we have to have a very defined process. Look, I get that. I will go toe to toe with a lot of enterprise sales leaders, and I can flex on the process side if you want me to. But I will tell you that I always like to look at the team as as individuals who have unique skills and have creative talents, and then also creativity that really is their superpower that allows them to really try new things and find success. So
yep, that's awesome. It's a good mix of art and science here in our little sales realm.
That's true.
So last question we've asked all our guests, both seasons. This one, it's coming at this point. If you could go back in time, now that you have the benefit of hindsight, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself entering into your career?
So I think for me, and I talked a little bit about this earlier around control, but I think just being flexible. There is so much power in being open to new experiences, new opportunities. I think there's this fear collectively of failure. I think we in folks who have opted into a career where a lot of their success is measured in a very quantitative way. There's a lot of fear around failing or not hitting that number and what's going to happen if that doesn't happen. I think that just sort of embracing the unknown and being flexible and open to new challenges and new opportunities, new experiences is what's going to give you a little bit more confidence and comfort around that failure when it happens. So for me personally, I was just stressed all the time about missing my number or not being good enough. And I was comparing myself to others on my team. And looking back, there were times that it limited my perspective. It limited my creativity. It limited the way I thought about my opportunities as a professional. And so being flexible and open to new experiences and opportunities is what I would tell myself if I could go back and be like, dude, it's not all about this one specific deal. It's not all about this one specific opportunity. It's about the journey and meeting these wonderful people along the way. And, and I would go back and tell myself, look, these relationships you're going to make through these different stops and along this journey, those relationships are really what actually matters.
Yep.
Those relationships really matter, and they don't just matter because they add value to your life and those relationships are meaningful to you personally, but they actually create value professionally, believe it or not. The relationship I have with Pankaj Prasad, for example, I just talked about Pank, so I can go back to him again. He's still somebody I have a relationship with. I still talk to the CTO of DoubleDutch. One of my best buddies was one of the guys who helped me get connected with somebody over at Square, best buddies that I worked with at a prior stop.
Yep.
That CEO, that story I told you about the CEO leaving, he's one of the guys who took me after he left, he called me up and brought me over to a startup that helped kind of launch the next stage of my career. My point I'm making is that there's tons of value in those relationships, both personally and professionally, and being open to trying new things is what I go back and tell myself.
Awesome. Love it. And love that, you said something that I think has been echoed a few times over on our episodes, which is just like being open-minded, being flexible. Mm-hmm. There's so much to learn, and you can learn from anywhere and anybody. So I think this is a good thread and something that has been said a few times, but for our audience, take it to heart. You're watching a guy in David who's done it and who's used it to his advantage throughout his whole career, and you can see where he's what he's done with it. So I think that's really profound. So thanks for sharing.
Can I say one more thing?
Yep.
Be nice to people. That's one of the lessons I learned really early on. Be nice to people. Be nice to your colleagues. Be nice to your customers. Be kind. You're going to be surprised at how far just kindness and genuine care and interest gets you. I look back at some of the people who I've been fortunate enough to work with along the way, and I look where they've gone in their career, and they're doing things that are way beyond even where I'm at or anything like that. And it's just the consistent thread that I see in these folks is that they're just nice, genuine people who care about others. And I think that it's maybe goes without saying that you should treat people with kindness and respect, but I think that's a really powerful lesson for folks too when they're interacting with others every day.
Yeah, I agree. That's an excellent place to leave it. And I do want to give you an opportunity to get out of here on one thing. Where can people find you? How do they reach out to you? How do they come seek you out?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, David McCollum. I don't even know my LinkedIn handle. That's kind of embarrassing. I should have probably had that prepared. Maybe you can put it in the show notes for folks.
We'll put it in the show notes, yep.
Yeah, and if people want to reach out to me, you're always welcome to reach out to me, and we can chat through different questions you've got, different ideas you've got, different. If I can help you, I'd love to help you out. And so that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And I don't know what other people they provide, Twitter handles and things like that. I don't really tweet that much, to be honest. I'm not really a big. I'm not really, even though I'm like Twitter adjacent at Square, I guess you could say it. I'm not as active on social media as maybe some other guests have been in the past. Probably the best way to get a hold of me professionally is via LinkedIn.
That's great. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Worries. Loved having you. We hope to do this again sometime in the future. And thanks for being so generous with your time and your thoughts.
Hey, Danny, no worries at all. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope to see you. Come visit beautiful Boise, Idaho when you can with your family. And congratulations in advance of your second child's birth.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, we'll talk soon.
Take care.